She vanished after a family dinner party. For nearly a year, her face haunted newspapers and late-night news. But no one expected to find her body beneath her own home, sealed inside the family's private wine cellar, just steps away from the truth. Sometimes, the most chilling secrets aren't buried in the woods or lost in remote places. Sometimes, they're hidden in plain sight, locked behind expensive mahogany doors, protected by silence, power, and shame. The case of Victoria Holden, the 26-year-old heiress to the Holden wine estate, shocked the nation not just for her tragic death, but for who had been keeping the truth buried all along. Before we unravel the dark secrets surrounding Victoria Holden's disappearance and discovery, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We break down the most shocking real-life crimes, one chapter at a time. Leave a like, share your theories in the comments, and let's dive into the chilling story of what really happened inside the Holden estate. When Victoria Holden stepped out of the grand ballroom that night, no one imagined it would be the last time she'd be seen alive. It was August 19, 2023, a night that glittered with champagne glasses and designer gowns, the soft hum of jazz flowing through the ivy-wrapped courtyards of the Holden estate in Sonoma County. The annual Holden Summer Gala was in full swing, a private affair reserved for the elite of wine country, CEOs, state senators, high-ranking judges, and one heiress who had grown increasingly uneasy with the world she inherited. Victoria Holden, 26, was the crown jewel of the Holden family empire. Blonde, elegant, whip-smart, and fiercely independent. She wasn't just a name in a trust fund, she was poised to take over the family business after her father Arthur Holden announced his early retirement. But not everyone was happy about that. That evening, Victoria arrived in a shimmering silver gown, arm-in-arm with her fiancé, Daniel Everett, a San Francisco corporate attorney with a clean-cut image and expensive shoes. They looked perfect, polished, curated. But as several guests later recalled, Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. According to Tessa Garrison, Victoria's childhood best friend, something had shifted in the weeks leading up to the gala. She told me, something was wrong, Tessa later recounted. She said she found something. She didn't say what. Just that she didn't feel safe anymore. Especially around her brother Elliot. By 10:30 p.m., Victoria was making the rounds, thanking guests, hugging old friends, sharing warm words with her father and cool ones with her mother, Marianne. At 11:02 p.m., she was captured on the estate's interior security camera heading toward the West Wing, where the guest rooms and cellar were located. In the footage, she appears alone. At 11:43 p.m., Tessa received a text message that she would later read out in court. "We need to talk. Something feels off. I think I'm being watched." It would be the last message Victoria ever sent. Her fiancé, Daniel, later told police that Victoria had gone back to their room to get a glass of wine. When she didn't return within the hour, he assumed she'd fallen asleep or left with Tessa. But by morning, she was gone. No one had seen her leave. Her purse, keys, and car remained untouched. Her phone went silent. And in a mansion wired with surveillance, no cameras showed her exiting the property. Detectives were called in by noon. The estate was sealed off. Drones flew overhead. Search dogs combed the vineyards. Even the nearby cliffs were scanned for signs of a fall. But there was no blood. No drag marks. No screams. No signs of a struggle. It was as if Victoria Holden had walked off the face of the earth, while surrounded by 80 of California's richest and most powerful people. And that raised the biggest question of all. How do you disappear in a house filled with eyes? Within days, whispers turned into headlines. The vanishing heiress. The police exploded with theories, ranging from abduction, to staged disappearance, to foul play from within. But behind the polished press statements and polite condolences, the Holden family wasn't holding together well. Elliot Holden, Victoria's older brother, hadn't spoken publicly. But multiple guests reported hearing the siblings argue near the wine cellar 2 hours before her disappearance. Elliot had recently been pushed out of the business after a failed investment cost the family millions. Victoria had reportedly opposed giving him a second chance. Meanwhile, their mother, Mary Ann Holden, gave an interview that chilled many. Victoria has always had a flair for drama. If she's left, she'll come back when she wants attention. But attention kept growing. The public wanted answers. The police kept digging. And Tessa, heartbroken and relentless, kept Victoria's name on every broadcast, every billboard, and every social media post. Still, there were no new leads. No ransom demands. No forensic evidence. Just that last text. That vanishing security clip. And a mansion full of guests who claimed they saw nothing. By the 1-month mark, even detectives privately admitted, it was like chasing a ghost. But ghosts don't usually leave phones behind. And they certainly don't lock themselves into places no one thought to check. Because as the world searched the vineyards and forests and rivers for Victoria Holden, no one had looked beneath the home where she was last seen. No one thought to look in the wine cellar. Not yet. It had been 9 long months since Victoria Holden vanished. In that time, the Holden family's reputation had slowly unraveled. Once considered a symbol of generational wealth and grace in the California wine industry, the Holdens had become a tight-lipped fortress of suspicion. What was once a home full of staff, events, and celebration had grown eerily quiet, shuttered gates, drawn curtains, and carefully worded statements to the press. Inside, Arthur and Mary Ann Holden clung to their version of events. Their daughter, they said, was troubled. Prone to emotional outbursts. Perhaps she ran off. Perhaps she would return. They made sure the public heard those words. Again and again. But behind closed doors, even the staff had begun whispering. Why had the family sealed off parts of the estate? Why were cleaning personnel dismissed within days of the disappearance? Why had construction been quietly ordered in the western wing? Still, the estate sat largely untouched by the authorities, thanks in part to powerful connections and a lack of clear evidence pointing to foul play. Until one morning, something shifted. In April, nearly 9 months after Victoria's disappearance, the Holdens began preparing to sell the property. Officially, it was to escape the memories. Privately, it was a quiet retreat from the growing scrutiny surrounding their daughter's case. That month, a man named Derek Klein, an estate assessor, was granted access to the home. His job was simple: survey the structure, assess damages, note any historical value for buyers. He moved from room to room, grand halls, ornate staircases, imported tilework, and family portraits with cold eyes. But it was in the West Wing wine cellar, a massive underground room lined with rare vintages, that he noticed something odd. There was a stretch of wall that didn't match the floor plan he'd been provided. The dimensions didn't align. The temperature dropped noticeably near one section. And when he knocked gently on the mahogany-paneled wall, the sound echoed. A hollow pocket. He paused. Moved a rack. Found slight separation in the woodwork. And then, a gap. Behind that false wall was a narrow door. No handle. No lighting. Just a small, unnatural space carved into the estate. And in that hidden space, he found her. The room was dry, airless, and sealed. Victoria Holden's body lay in the center, wrapped in a velvet drape, her once elegant gown stiff with age and exposure. Her shoes were missing. One arm was tucked beneath her side. What remained of her was heartbreakingly still. An untouched glass sat beside her. The scent of aged wine lingered in the air, though none had been poured in months. The curtain that covered her was later confirmed to be one of the same used to decorate the gala ballroom on the night she disappeared. Her dress was unmistakably the one she wore that night. And the room, barely larger than a pantry, was designed in a way that only someone familiar with the estate structure could have created. It had no external entrance. No signs of panic from within. And the lock mechanism? Installed from the outside. She had never left the estate. She had died within it. Investigators were summoned immediately. By the following evening, the property was cordoned off for the first full forensic sweep. The Haldens had no choice. The body of their daughter, long missing, long denied, had been found under their roof. An autopsy confirmed what many feared: blunt force trauma to the head. No drugs in her system. No signs of restraint. No defensive wounds. The death had likely been sudden and intentional. The time of death aligned closely with her final message sent the night of the gala. And that message, sent only to her best friend, Tessa, had hinted at fear. At suspicion. At someone watching her. She had walked into that cellar that night for a reason. And someone had made sure she never walked out. It didn't take long for suspicion to take shape. Only a small number of people had regular access to the cellar and full knowledge of the estate's internal structure. Elliot Halden, her older brother, who had previously managed the wine inventory and oversaw renovations on the cellar before being ousted from the family business. Daniel Everett, her fiancé, who had been seen acting strangely the morning after the gala, and whose timeline of events had inconsistencies the police initially brushed aside. Mary Ann Halden, Victoria's mother, who had always dismissed the disappearance with thinly veiled annoyance, and who had quietly filed an insurance adjustment on Victoria's life policy just weeks before her death. The family had closed ranks after Victoria vanished. But now, the walls they'd built to protect themselves were crumbling. The investigators took everything: house logs, construction documents, keys, internal blueprints. They interviewed former staff. They uncovered sealed financial records. And for the first time, the Halden family home was treated not as a private sanctuary, but as a potential crime scene. What happened to Victoria in that final hour remains a puzzle of broken fragments. But one thing is certain: she was afraid. She had confided in Tessa. She had become distant from her family. And she had discovered something she planned to expose. The cellar, once just a space for aging bottles and family pride, had become a tomb. And whoever had sealed that door had not only taken her life, but believed the truth would stay buried with her. But truth, as it turns out, can ferment in silence. And when it's finally uncorked, it refuses to be ignored. With the discovery of Victoria Halden's body, investigators began to peel back the layers of one of the most carefully constructed lies Sonoma County had ever witnessed. The public had theories. The media had suspects. Her brother, Elliot, was erratic. Her fiancé, Daniel, had secrets. Her mother, Mary Ann, was cold and calculating. But no one, not even the most cynical among them, could have predicted the truth. Because the one who ended Victoria's life wasn't the bitter brother. It wasn't the jealous fiancé. It wasn't the scheming mother. It was her father, Arthur Halden. Arthur Halden had spent 3 decades building an empire from vines and soil. The Halden name was synonymous with prestige, power, and purity. But behind the pristine labels and silver-trimmed tasting rooms, there were shadows: dirty dealings, unpaid debts, regulatory bribes, forged import licenses. Victoria had discovered them all. A ledger, handwritten and hidden in the family's private study, outlined years of backdoor wine contracts, tax evasion, and hush money payments. And she'd found it just weeks before the gala. Victoria wasn't content to look the other way. She had always been sharp, and that was what he loved about her. Her brother wasn't the sharp one and didn't have a thing for the family's legacy like she did, and that was why Arthur wanted her to be the heiress, but she was proving far too smart. She had a plan to modernize the estate, cut ties with the dark dealings, and remove her father from the top seat. Arthur knew it. And for a man who had built everything from the ground up, the idea of being removed, by his own daughter, was something he could not tolerate. But he also knew Victoria was adored. Publicly admired. Her disappearance had nearly ruined them. So when she threatened to go public with what she found, Arthur made a decision. If she couldn't be silenced, she had to disappear. The night of the gala was his opportunity. He had hosted the event to appear normal, to avoid suspicion, to provide witnesses, to frame the setting as a joyous family celebration. Victoria, wearing silver, had returned to the cellar around 11:30 p.m. She had gone there to retrieve her favorite bottle to share with Tessa privately. Arthur followed her down, claiming he wanted to talk. That talk lasted just under 10 minutes. He calmly asked her to reconsider her decision. She refused. She told him she was going to the press. That the days of protecting the Halden name were over. And in a moment of quiet, deliberate control, Arthur reached for a vintage bottle from the cellar shelf. A ceremonial piece. Heavy, dark glass. A prized possession from a forgotten vintage. And he struck her from behind. She collapsed instantly. There was no struggle. No scream. Just silence. He stood there, staring. Then moved quickly. He pulled down one of the velvet drapes used for gala decor, stored temporarily beside the wine cases. He wrapped her gently, almost reverently. Then, behind the farthest rack, he removed a single wooden panel, the one he had secretly modified years ago to conceal older vintages during a tax audit. Behind that panel, he placed her body. He had already cleared the small space days earlier under the pretense of expanding the collection. He closed the panel, sealed it from the outside with a custom sliding lock, and walked away. Thinking she would never be found because disposing her body was too risky and at least he owned the property. And he never thought anybody would go down there and most especially not a stranger. Upstairs, the gala continued. By the time guests began noticing Victoria was missing, Arthur had already washed his hands, returned to the ballroom, and was raising a glass. To family. To legacy. To Halden wine. Arthur might have gotten away with it. For months, he did. But in the wake of her body's discovery, pressure mounted. Daniel cracked first. In his second interview, he admitted that Arthur had taken him aside that night, told him Victoria had run off, warned him not to panic the family. He had believed him, until now. Then came Elliot. Always angry, always unpredictable, but not a killer. His fingerprints were on the wine rack because he'd been storing family reserves. He had no idea what was behind the wall. His alibi, for once, held. And Marianne? She had known about the ledger. She had even begged Arthur to reason with Victoria, but never imagined he would go so far. When investigators told her where Victoria's body was found, her hands trembled. For the first time, she wept. Then came the breakthrough. Hidden in Arthur's private office, beneath a floorboard, was a second ledger. And inside it? A note in Arthur's handwriting. She was going to ruin us. I did what had to be done. The note was dated August 20th, the morning after the gala. Arthur Halden was arrested 3 days later. He didn't struggle. Didn't argue. His only words were, "You'll never understand what it means to build something from nothing." At trial, the courtroom sat in stunned silence as prosecutors described a man who had murdered his own daughter to protect the illusion of a legacy. The jury deliberated just 6 hours. He was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Marianne Halden, who had withheld information and misled authorities, received 5 years for obstruction of justice. Daniel Everett, cleared of involvement, disappeared from public life. Elliot, the once disgraced son, reclaimed his name, not because he earned it, but because the one person who had tried to do the right thing, was gone. Victoria Halden's story is not just about power or betrayal, it's about the unthinkable happening in the place she called home. She wasn't killed by a stranger or a jealous lover, but by the one person she trusted to protect her above all else. In trying to save her family's future, she paid the ultimate price. Her voice was buried. Her truth was sealed behind mahogany and stone. But in the end, truth found a way through. Because even in silence, some secrets scream. Now that the truth has come out, that Victoria's own father was the one who ended her life to protect a crumbling empire, we want to hear from you. Do you believe Arthur Holden planned her murder long before the gala? Or was it a crime of impulse masked by cold calculation? And had the wine cellar never been inspected, do you think anyone would have ever found Victoria? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might just help others see this story through a different lens. If this story shook you like it did us, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We bring you in-depth true crime cases that unravel secrets, lies, and betrayals in their rawest forms. Like this video if you believe Victoria's story deserved to be told, and share it so her voice continues to echo beyond the cellar where they tried to silence her. And remember, truth doesn't stay buried forever. Until next time, stay alert, stay questioning, and above all, stay human.